Welcome to Garden Angels. Spring's here and it's a terrific time to get out into the garden, and boy do we have some great weekend projects for you. I'm in the veggie patch today, building some bamboo trellises and teepees for my snow peas.
And I'm going to give you some insider tips on how to grow perfect citrus, plus the complete guide to fertilising your garden to keep it looking great.
And if you need some privacy in your backyard, I've got 5 fantastic hedges that you might just want to plant out. Time to get your hands dirty. This is Garden Angels!
Growing beautiful, juicy citrus fruit like this at your place is really simple. You just have to follow a few easy tips. So listen up, because in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you everything you need to know to get fruit as good as this. Step 1 is to find the right location, and that means lots of sun. Now, in warmer climates, they will cope with a little bit of shade, but if you give them too much shade, you'll find you get lots of leafy growth at the expense of wonderful fruit. Now, step 2, of course, is to get stuck into some great soil preparation. See, the key is to get lots of compost and organic matter into the soil. So make sure you get your hands on a bag from the garden centre, or you might have some homemade compost yourself. Now, of course, the great thing is it helps the soil to hold on to a little bit more moisture, but it also helps to nourish and enrich the soil and, importantly, improve drainage. And good drainage is exactly what citrus want. Okay, now when it comes to doing your planting, you just want to dig a hole a little bit bigger than the root system. But the one really important thing to consider is that the bud union, which is this part right here, when you plant it, it needs to be at least 10 centimetres above the soil level. So a good rule of thumb is just to make sure that when you plant it at the same level as it was in the original container. Citrus have a shallow root system, so they like a reasonably consistent supply of water, particularly when they're young for establishment, but also when the fruit's maturing, because you want to reduce that chance of the fruit splitting. Now, I've just added a little bit of seaweed solution to this, just to kickstart these plants and get good root development. And of course, to help to keep that moisture in the soil, just apply a good layer of mulch. Has the added bonus, of course, of keeping weed competition down. Now, when it comes to mulching, just make sure you keep the mulch a good hand span's width away from your stem, just to avoid any rotting. You only need a layer about 7 to 10 centimetres thick. And also, just another little tip for you, citrus don't really like to compete too much for water and nutrients, so if you're planting them with any companions, just keep them well away. Now, the final tip, but perhaps the most important one for getting a bumper crop like this, is to make sure you get out the fertiliser. Now, you should be feeding between when you see that first new growth come through in the spring, right through until December. Now, if you do feed past December, you'll find that you'll often force the plant into late autumn growth. And what that can do is actually encourage problems like citrus leaf miner. But when you are fertilising, I would use a controlled release fertiliser like Osmocote around the drip line of your tree. You can cover it up with a little bit of topsoil or even mulch, or just scratch it into the surface of the soil. But because citrus really do love their food, I tend to supplement them a little bit with a liquid fertiliser too, just to give them a real kick along during the growing season. Now, if you aren't fertilising with a liquid food, just make sure that you do water your plants really well before and after fertilising.
At the beginning of the series, I set myself the task of building a veggie patch from scratch. I improved the existing garden beds and built new raised beds on top of the paving. I allowed for drainage, I added some gravel, and then packed in the best soil mix I could find. Then I planted annual veggies in rotating gardens. And last week I planted the perennials, potatoes, companion plants and herbs. That was then. Hey, welcome back to Angels HQ. The veggie patch is going off, everything's growing really well. But I want to show you something down here. Two plants not doing so well, my parsley and my little tiny basil. Both of them are struggling with these hot winds that have struck up in spring. So you need to give them a little extra water. Now the trick is here to make a little saucer around the plant individually, so when you do water, the water sinks right in. Now I know what you're thinking about these snow peas, that they need some kind of support because they are a climbing vegetable. So I've got a great idea to give them a bit of support and a bit of a helping hand. This is my grove, my forest of clumping bamboo that I've got between me and my neighbour. So bamboo's great to give you privacy, but it also gives you a few extra things that you can use in the garden. Every year at about this time, I chop some of the larger canes off, and then I can use them to build my teepees and my trellis and my arbours, and then next year it just grows back. Each pea needs its own stake to grow up, so I've got 11 snow peas and 11 stakes. So I'm going to go around in a circle to make my teepee, basically. It's just a wigwam design. Bring them all together, hold them with one hand, and then tie it into place. We need to give them a little helping hand so they can get up to these twiggy bits. And a simple string will do, and just loop the whole way along and keep going round. There are two different types of tomatoes. There's bush tomatoes that grow 1 metre by 1 metre, and there's vine tomatoes, which grow 2 metres by 2 metres, and they really do need a trellis to grow up. When you've got your 4 corner posts in, it's just a matter of boxing it up with smaller pieces of bamboo. Well, that'll do it for today. When they get up to here, I can always add a couple more layers later. And now for my next trellis. I want to grow beans, tall growing beans. They grow about 2 metres tall. And so I'm going to grow them on a tunnel so I can walk right through. So all I have to do now is tie the 2 ends and then put a top rail of bamboo right across the top and then tie all the middle ones to it. Oh, look, the thing I love about my super-duper tunnel is I can grow 2 different climbing veggies on it. This side, I can grow my cucumbers, and on this side, I've chosen beans. Now, growing beans by seed is the easiest thing in the world. 100% success rate. You've got some really interesting varieties available to you. This one's an heirloom bean called rattlesnake, and you can't buy rattlesnake beans at the local greengrocer, so the family's just going to love it.
Hedges can serve many purposes in a garden. They can create the beautiful garden room, they can help determine your boundaries, and they can even protect you from things like noise and, of course, wind. Now, those more experienced gardeners could probably already create a magnificent hedge, but for those novices that don't really know where to start, or perhaps what type of plant to choose, don't worry, I've got 5 very reliable types of hedging, and I'm going to throw in a few tips and tricks along the way. Well, I could hardly do a hedging story and not talk about Japanese box. A lovely hedge for separating smaller areas as they only get to about 1 metre in height. Relatively slow growing, so it'd take you probably about 5 or 10 years to get to that 1 metre. You could space them about 50 centimetres apart. They like a reliably moist soil with good drainage. If you're after something a little bit softer and doesn't need as much pruning, you can't go past the Viburnum odoratissimum. I'd plant these viburnums about 1 metre apart, and be sure to dig in plenty of nice, rich organic matter for these. They're good in full sun part shade, and they get to about 3 metres in height by about 2 metres across. Now, a hedging plant that's been very popular in the last 10 years or so would have to be the good old lily pilly. This particular one is called a Syzygium australe. Syzygiums require ample moisture to keep looking their best. And I'd probably space these at about 1 metre apart. They'll naturally get to about 5 metres in height, but keep your eye on it as it's pretty quick growing. Now, another lily pilly that's made the cut is Acmina smithii or smithii minor. Great for a nice, tight foliage screening plant to about 2 metres. You'd probably get about 1 metre high growth out of this plant in 2 or 3 years. And this particular variety of lily pilly is great because it doesn't get that awful pimply thing on the leaf that's known as psyllid. There's nothing quite like the sweet fragrance of a Morea. Not only are they covered in masses of flower in spring and summer, but they also spot flower after rain. These will probably grow about 1/2 metre a year. They're pretty quick growing. They're a great all-round plant, and with that added bonus of a beautiful fragrance. See, I told you it wasn't so scary, but of course, there's more than 5 great hedging plants on the market, so have a look around at your local nursery or even wander the streets and see what's growing best in your area. And most importantly, if you don't want to be out there every weekend pruning your hedge, choose a slower growing hedge or one that doesn't need as much maintenance. It's most important that you tailor your hedge to your lifestyle.
As the weather warms, feeding can be one of the most important things that you can do in the garden, and it is sometimes overlooked. Now, I mean, it can be the difference between okay-looking plants and amazing-looking plants like this. So I'm going to give you my complete guide to fertilising. Now, you only have to walk around the garden at this time of year to see the frenzy of growth and, of course, of flowering. Now, to sustain growth and development, plants absorb lots of different minerals and nutrients. But the big 3 to keep an eye out for are your nitrogen, which is for leafy growth, potassium for great flowers and fruit, and then phosphorus for strong, healthy roots. So they're like your meat and veg. Now, when it comes to feeding the garden, I'm a big fan of the water-soluble fertilisers. Now, if you're a kind of all-in-one person and you just want one product in the shed, then you can go for an all-purpose plant food. But if you've got something really special in the garden, so say, you know, Granny's Rose or whatever it might be, you might want to go for a flowering-specific fertiliser that's jam-packed with a little bit more potassium for a real punch. Then, if you've got acid-loving plants in the garden, so that's things like your camellias and your rhododendrons and your azaleas, then you can look for a specific acid-loving food like this. You only need a couple of spoonfuls to a watering can, and off you go. Just the one key thing to remember with your liquid feeding is that you do need to do it often. Do it every 7 to 14 days if you want best results. Now, of course, a watering can is fine for pots or small garden areas, but when you're dealing with a large area, this is by far the easiest way to apply your water-soluble foods. So you just attach it to your hose and it feeds the product through at a perfect rate. You can cover large areas. Just make sure you keep an eye on the water restrictions in your area. Now, if you're a little bit time poor, then you might prefer a controlled release fertiliser like this. Now, take a look at these prills. Each one of these delivers a continuous but balanced supply of nutrients to plants for at least 6 months. Now, a lot of native plants, like your Banksias and your Grevilleas or the Pretties, tend to be a little bit phosphorus sensitive. So you need to look for a fertiliser that's low in phosphorus. You could, though, if you're an organic nut, go for something like a Blood and Bone. Now, Blood and Bone is a traditional old fertiliser, but because it's organic, not only does it feed nutrients to plants slowly, but it also encourages good soil structure and gets lots of good microbes in the soil. So it's really good to sprinkle around your native plants. But if you do have some blood and bone in the shed, I've got another tip for you. It tends to be a little bit low in potassium, which is one of those elements that's really important for fruiting and flowering. So you can pick up some sulphate of potash from your local garden centre and then simply put about 2 handfuls of sulphate of potash per bucket full of blood and bone and just really mix it through. Apply it to your garden and you've got a wonderful organically based fertiliser that can be used on everything. So there you have it, my complete guide to fertilising your garden and getting flowers, fruit and foliage that look this good.
Seemingly peaceful yards around Australia hide 1,000 secret stories of life, death and heroism, starring the good, the bad and the ugly. There's so many backyard bugs out in my garden at the moment. Some are good, some are bad, and there's not one spray that fixes everything, so it's important to identify what you've got before you start spraying. Now, I have found at this time of the year that the azalea lacebug is a real problem with azaleas, and it causes a silvering over the leaf later in summer. And now's the time to prevent that by spraying them with a systemic insecticide. That gets into the sap of the plant, so when the insects feed on the sap, then they die. You know, aphids are a massive problem on roses in springtime. They encrust the new buds and they suck all the energy out. And I was just about to nuke this one, but I just found that nature had solved the problem for me. Ladybirds are voracious insects and they eat aphids, up to 600 aphids a day. Wow, you know, one of the most common questions on my radio show is what do I do to control curl grubs, these revolting witchetty grubs that exist in the soil? Now, I don't think it's a big problem in the garden, but in pots it is, so you could spray in pots. But in the garden, I just pick them out and feed them to my chooks. Here, girls. Here, girls. Here, girls, one for you. Come here, Eva. I always keep the coffee grounds from my morning coffee and just sprinkle it along the garden. It's a great remedy against snails and slugs, and quite a simple one. And the other little homemade trap I like is beer. Snails love beer, particularly male snails. Just pop them into the garden, fill it up with beer and watch them drink and die. I like to attract the good bugs into my garden so they can eat the baddies. And you can do that by companion planting. Things like alyssum and violas do a great job. But you can also plant the good bug mix, and it's full of really unusual cottagey plants all together. Queen Anne's lace and marigolds, baby breath, dill and sweet Alice. All you need to do is take a little pinch of the seeds and plant them in spring. Good, my special delivery has arrived. You know, sometimes you need to bring in the big guns and they arrive in the mail all ready to help. And this is what I need help with. I'll show you what's in the box in a minute. But this lily pilly has so many different types of scale and it's covered in sooty mould. It's a very common problem and it's absolutely in plague proportions. Hard to spray, but that's where my big guns come in. This is a little beetle and it's called Luke, and he's a lady beetle, shaped like a helmet. And all you need to do is release him into your lily pillies and he'll eat all your scale. Job done.
Well, if you think it'd be near impossible to grow citrus in a space like this, think again. I've got some great space-saving ideas that are bound to change your mind. Well, you didn't think I was going to jackhammer through concrete to get my plants in, did you? The
Think about using lightweight pots. This is a great range called Urban Light. Comes in a range of colours and styles, and it's perfect for these citrus. Now, as citrus are heavy feeders, I've used a combination of both a premium potting mix and compost for that extra boost of nutrients. Well, I bet you think you couldn't get citrus like this. This is what's known as an espalier, and it's a nice little cheat to use every surface that you have available in a really small space, especially the vertical rises. This tree in the ground will get anything up to about 6 metres, believe it or not, but the Eureka lemon, when it's espaliered, will stay this size. And when you're potting your plant into a pot, make sure that the stem is flush up against the back of that pot so that it sits nice and tight against the wall. If you've ever wondered what this little join is at the bottom of a citrus plant, it's what's known as a graft point. And the reason for grafting is to produce a hardier plant or sometimes more fruit on a plant. It's the process of joining the top half of a citrus to the rootstock or roots of another citrus. It's all a little bit confusing, but all you need to know is it produces a load more fruit. At about 2 metres in height, they're perfect for a small space like this. Another exciting option for the balcony is the wonderful splitzer range that Isles created in 2007. Now, this one in particular is a lemon and lime. So believe it or not, there's a lime graft and a lemon on the one plant. Of course, citrus this big won't stay in a small pot forever. So do pot them up. That means putting them into a bigger pot every 2 years or so. And of course, there's the added benefit of screening ugly things like this air conditioning on balconies. As well as this slow-release fertiliser that I'm putting at the base of each of these pots, I'd also suggest monthly applications of both a pellet of manure and a complete citrus food, and I would alternate those throughout the seasons. And of course, this is a really restricted amount of soil, so there's going to be less water available to these plants, so water them every other day. And because citrus have shallow feeding roots, it's really important to give them a nice blanket of mulch so that those roots don't dry out. So there you have it, some spectacular citrus solutions for small spaces. And if you follow my tips, you'll be sipping homemade lemonade before you know it.
Well, thanks for joining us on Garden Angels. And if there's anything you need to check up on, don't forget our website. So, girls, what do you think of my teepees?
I like the vertical height.
And the recycling of the bamboo. That's what got me.
Well, next week, I'm going to lay a lawn for lawn bowls.
Lawn bowls. And if you're not much of a lawn bowler and you want a turf alternative, scrap the lawn altogether, I've got some great suggestions.
And if you've got any of those really dull, shady areas in the garden, then definitely stick with us. We've got some great ideas for you. And we'll see you next time
on Garden Angels.